So, Allan, how would I find people on a similar path to myself when it's outside of the normal social
Sure. How do you, so
Yeah.
like
society?
like-minded people or people with similar lifestyle,
I guess people on a similar
journey?
yeah, a similar journey, a similar spiritual journey that aren't necessarily
Yeah,
looking for spirituality,
sure.
but aren't content with the consumerist society that most of us are living in.
That's a good question. How do I find people on a similar path? So, when I get a lot of these type of questions, the way my mind works is it wants to find a practical solution, and then it wants to go into more the kind of the philosophical. Right? So I'll see if I can cover both. A very practical context, you use the internet. The internet is unbelievable with the various groups and the social forums and the ways that you can get very precise and say, this is who I am, this is what I'm looking for, and use 1,000,001 different tools to allow you to really focus on like-minded people that are behaving in a similar fashion or living a very similar lifestyle. And so those kind of tools, although of course there's a degree of effort because it casts oftentimes a wide net, but with enough refinement, you can find yourself more precise and optimistically developing a bit of a connection. And especially if you approach it with true authenticity, which is you've really done the work to know exactly what path you're on. Like people say, oh, I'm not connected to this or I'm not connected to that. They may be truthful insofar as they think they're not connected to something, but then you go a little bit further. Like for somebody who says, oh, I'm not connected to the material, I just want to travel, but then when they travel, they stay in like very high-end resorts, or they're constantly complaining about snags that they hit while they're in the third world, or the developing world, because it doesn't have all the luxuries that they're accustomed to from Midtown Manhattan. And it's like, well, yeah, like you have to recognize exactly what it is that's calling you and the type of lifestyle and what you're willing to sacrifice for that lifestyle, and if that's true to you. And if you have that degree of self-awareness, you put yourself in a wonderful position to communicate that to a bigger group and to find other people who are also truly on that path. Right? So that's kind of the first part of the answer. Know thyself. And then with that awareness, find others that have a similar awareness on a similar journey using tools like the internet. I would say in a more philosophical or maybe a spiritual sense, I think of that I mentioned to you, that J.R. Rollins, that poem, like not all that's gold, not all that glitters is gold, not all those that wander are lost. Right? Sometimes our journey is one with self, and with self, that journey can take us into very individualistic, isolated states. But simply because you're metaphorically, or literally rather, on your own, it doesn't mean that you're by yourself. Because to be with self, to truly be still with self, can be one of the most rewarding spaces to be in. And I found from a pure relationship or philosophical kind of spiritual state, when you truly get to the place where you're really incredibly comfortable being entirely by yourself, it's in that moment that you're best positioned to really truly connect with someone else, whether in a romantic sense or just in an interpersonal sense. So when you no longer need somebody to feel complete, when you're no longer externalizing your relationship requirements, right? When your attachment has gone away and you're able to be completely comfortable with who you are, that's when you have the greatest likelihood of attracting somebody genuinely and authentically to your true self. And so sometimes the journey takes you into a state of isolation or individualistic lifestyle because it's just an opportunity for you to truly get to know yourself and to bring yourself to the best place that you can be in. And with that awareness and that acceptance, you're then positioned wonderfully on the other side of it to connect authentically with the people that are on a similar journey.
Okay. So what if your true self is just like in constant conflict with itself, and
it's not your true self. So I only say that because the constant conflict, so your true self would actually recognize sometimes opposing energies,
mm-hmm.
and one of two things happens. You're either in acceptance with that variation,
Mm-hmm.
right, which is that it actually empowers you to communicate when you meet somebody, that you can actually say, hey, I have these tendencies and this variation, and the right people will have similar variations. And so even though it's an unpredictability, it actually ends up being synergistic. Or the second thing develops, which we talk about in astrology all the time, which is the harmonization of opposing energies.
Okay.
And you see it all the time, like a sun-moon opposition, for example, is somebody who wants the adventure and independence of the sun, but at the same time wants the nurturing predictability and comforts of the moon. And so when they're in a relationship, they want to be single, and when they're single, they want to be in a relationship. And as they move through that state of true awareness and they start to recognize that tendency, when they're in a relationship and the masculine calls them into adventure, they recognize that energy as it's manifesting. And when they're single and the feminine calls them into potentially the wrong relationship or calls them to settle down, they recognize that tendency as well. And so, like anything else, this is a journey of growth, introspection, evolution. And with this type of awareness, we start to learn more and more about ourselves. And as we go deeper into that self-awareness, we can see these energies manifesting, and then we can choose, do I accept them, communicate them to those that may be affected, and otherwise let them be and flow with it, right? Like a surfer on the wave.
Mm-hmm.
Or do I need to harmonize this energy, which is to bring these two that may be opposing into a state of congruency? And that is, what are the tools that I need to invoke to recognize how I'm being pulled in different directions and be okay with it? So like, for example, somebody who's in a relationship and they hit a speed bump because they're not dealing well with their partner, and all of a sudden they want to jettison out of it and find their own independence. They may actually communicate that that's what they're feeling to their partner, and then maybe instead of just breaking it up altogether, they take a few days on a weekend retreat into the mountains, just so they have some solitude so that they can reflect. And then they come back in a better energetic space. So whereas their tendency in the past may have been to run all together, now they can slow it down and catch their breath. So this is always the journey, is the recognition of what it is that motivates us, where it is that we're conflicted, what our own interpersonal incongruencies are, and see the outside world as this beautiful canvas by which our personality is being splashed up against all the time. And now we start to observe the paint as it's hitting that canvas and recognize exactly where we might need to tweak and what kind of image we want to create.